Hello and welcome. The compliance functionality allows you to specify individual release checks for master data and documents. For example, via two-person rule, you can approve bill of materials and routings, releasing items, vendors, customers, and sales or purchase documents. In this video, we explain the basic setup of the compliance functionality, and we will set up permissions and a compliance check using an example. Let us switch to Business Central right away. Via the Tell Me function, we open the compliance setup. On this setup, we can specify the number series that we want to use for the compliance documents that are created for the release checks in later workflows. Also, we can set up via the toggle legal owner or possessor requested for rejection if we want only the user who created a compliance document to be able to reject it. We leave this function deactivated for now. The basic setup is already complete and we are closing the page. The compliance permission structure is extremely flexible and can be individually adapted to your company. Let me introduce one example that we can use to set up the permission structure, and after that, the compliance check in Business Central. Let's say we want to implement a compliance check whenever a purchase is more than $50,000. In this case, the purchase order must first be approved by a team leader and additionally by a manager so it can be released. Before we start our setup, I like to give you an overview over the compliance permission structure. The compliance permissions define the steps of a compliance workflow and the permissions of a user. These can be adjusted according to the structure of your company. At least one permission set should be set up with approval and rejection. To ensure uniformity permissions and simplify permission management, permission sets are first assigned to permission groups. Subsequently, those groups are assigned to users. Back in Business Central, we open Compliance Permissions via the Tell Me function. The individual permissions are specified on this page. For our example, we set up an approval permission for team leads and one for managers. Additionally, we specify one permission for rejection. The individual permissions are now complete. The permissions are grouped before later being assigned to a user authorized to manage compliance checks or rejections. Thus, we open the compliance permissions groups. In the header of this page, the permission group is specified. In our example, we create several groups. One group for team leaders authorized to approve documents up to $50,000. And we set up a group that enables the approval of all documents, including those higher than $50,000. Additionally, a group for managers is set up. On the Lines Fast tab, the permissions are assigned to a group. For the group of team leaders authorized to review documents under $50,000, we assign the permission sets Approval Team Leads and Rejection. We limit the approval in the maximum amount field, with the amount of $49,999. For the group of team leaders authorized to approve documents above $50,000, we assign the permission sets approval team leads and rejection. We do not impose any limit in the maximum amount field. And for the manager group, we assign the permissions approval manager and also rejection. For our example, this is all we need. Finally, the permissions groups must be assigned to users. We open the compliance user setup via Tell Me. Here we select a user on the user ID field. Afterwards, we choose compliance permission groups on the ribbon to assign the authorization groups. In the permission group code field, we now assign the permissions group team leader for review documents under the amount of $50,000 to the user. Another team leader receives the authorization to review even larger amounts. Finally, the manager is assigned the permission group manager. That's it for our required setup of permissions, permission groups, and the compliance users. Back to our diagram. Now we have already set up the permissions in Business Central and assigned them to the users. The permissions are also entered in the compliance tables in corresponding fields to establish a connection between user permissions and the steps in the compliance workflow. This also allows an individual approval depth to be defined for each compliance table record. The compliance structure enables up to 5 approvals. Our next step is now to set up these compliance checks in the compliance tables based on our example in Business Central. To specify the compliance checks, we open the compliance tables via the Tell Me function. For the first example, in the code field, we enter a unique code for the compliance check for purchase documents over $50,000. After this, we specify in the table number field a table for which we want to check compliance. In this case, we select the table Purchase Header. In the description field, we provide a description for the compliance check. Since we want to set the compliance check exclusively for purchase documents with a value of $50,000 or more, we enter the amount in the appropriate field. It is important to note that the system will always check the local currency and total amount, excluding valued added tax of a document in the later process. In the fields for permissions, the permissions that were previously defined in the setup must be assigned. The fields Release Permission Code and Reject Permission Code specify the permissions for approval and rejection of the compliance document. This means that only users assigned to a compliance permission group that includes these permissions may approve or reject a compliance document. In the Release Permission Code field, the manager's approval permission is entered. This ensures that the manager, after granting the second approval, simultaneously approves the compliance document. In the field Reject Permission Code, we entered the permission set for rejection. In the release fields, we set how many approvals are required for this compliance check and which permissions are necessary for each release. In this case, we activate the checkbox Release 1 and enter the permission for the team leader's approval. For the second approval, we also activate the Release 2 checkbox and enter the manager's approval permission. The first compliance check has now been set up, and to ensure that it is activated, we are changing the status to Released. Finally, I'd like to show you how this check is applied once a purchase order over $50,000 is created and released in Business Central. Since the compliance check is defined without change permission, all users in the compliance user setup can initiate it. If a user is not in the compliance user setup, they will receive an error message. Let's look at it within the order. The purchase local currency field in the statistics shows that the limit of 50,000 USD is exceeded here. When releasing the document, this amount is now starting the compliance check workflow. As soon as the workflow is approved, the order is released. Within our next videos, we explain how to work with compliance checks for records and documents and some other functionality. For further information, you can also visit our online help at the shown link. Thanks for your attention.